Good morning, friends. Today we are going to talk about lesson 7-4, which is dividing a decimal by a whole number. So an example of this would be, let's say I have like a trail outside, like a walking trail that's 3 6/10 miles long. And every 3 feet, I have a little marker to let you know where you are on the trail. How many markers would I need along this trail in order to how would I find the answer to that problem? So the first thing that I want to point out to you is remember that this number inside the house is called the dividend, and the number that is outside the house is called the divisor. It is always okay for us to have a decimal as the dividend inside the house. It is never okay for us to have a decimal as our divisor, and we'll get more into that tomorrow. So the first thing that you need to know is that the decimal always gets placed first. So before I do any math, I actually need to go back and look at my problem, and I need to bring up the decimal directly into my answer. It kind of reminds me of when we were adding and subtracting decimals, how I always taught you that you line up those decimals perfectly and you drop it into your answer. This is the exact same strategy. We have to put our decimal up in our quotient first before we do anything else. So let's actually solve this problem now. So I'm going to bring up my decimal. And from this point on, I'm going to kind of pretend like this isn't 3 6/10. I'm going to kind of pretend like it's 36, but I do know that there's a decimal there, and it's important for me as a mathematician to know that this really isn't 36. It's 3 6/10. So now I'm just going to figure out my quotient like I would normally. So can 3 fit into 3? Yes, it can. It can fit in one time. I'm going to bring my subtraction down and bring down my 6. Can 3 fit into 6? Yes, it can, 2 times. Now, because I get a 0 as my remainder, I can stop there. If I get a remainder, I can't just write it like R2, R3 like I used to. Because I'm writing my answer as a decimal, I actually have to include it as part of that decimal, and I will show you what that looks like in another problem. So let's take a look at a big old problem. We have 306 and 25 hundredths divided by 49. So my first step, friends, is always to put that decimal right up in my answer. I like to draw mine really, really big so I don't forget that it's there. Now I'm going to solve it like I would normally. So let's take, I'm going to use purple this time. Can 49 fit into 3? It cannot. Can 49 fit into 30? Nope. Can 49 fit into 306? Absolutely it can. So remember our little tack-it trick? I'm going to look at the first digit of my divisor, which is a 4, but since this is 49, I'm going to think of it like a 5 because it's closer to 50. And then I'm going to look at my first 2 digits of my dividend. So 5 into 30, it can go about 6 times. So over here on the side of my paper, I'm going to try to figure out what is 49 times 6. Ooh, 294. That looks perfect. So I'm going to put a 6 up here in my answer, in my quotient, and then I'm going to subtract 294. And I get 12. Okay, but I still have to bring down my 2. So now I'm looking at how many times does 49 fit into 122. So same trick. I'm thinking of this like a 5 and this like 12. So 5 can fit into 12 2 times. So let's see what 49 times 2 is. I'm going to use this bottom scrap of paper all the way down here because I don't want to make my paper too messy. I get 98. That looks like that's all that will work. So I'm going to put a 2 up in my quotient. I'm going to subtract 98. I get 24. And now I bring down my 5. And I've got 49 into the number 245. Well, I already know that 49 times 6 was 294. So I know it's got to probably be 5. So let's go ahead and put a 5 up here and see what 49 times 5 would be. Oh my gosh, it fits perfectly. Okay, so I end up with 0 as my remainder, so I can stop there. So my answer would be 6 25/100. Now, I could still double check this by doing multiplication. So if you remember when you practiced in topic 6, you would just pretend like this is 625 times 49, and then you would place that decimal after you solve the problem. So that is still a strategy you can use to double check your answers in this topic. So let's move on to do another one together. Go ahead and make sure that you have your whiteboard or your pad of paper ready to go. Let's take 14 4/10 divided by 15. So first step, I'm going to plot my decimal right up there in the top. And I already know that this is going to be a trickier problem because I can see that 15 is my divisor. And I know that 14 is my whole number here. So I know that 15 can't fit into 1 and it can't fit into 14. So now I'm looking at 15 into basically 144. So I can think about 15 like a clock. So I think about 15, then 30. So 15 times 2 is 30, then 45, then 60. So if I know that 4 15s can fit in the number 60, then I would know that 8 15s could fit into 120. So what do we think for 144? Let's think about 15 times 9. I get 135. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to put a 9 up in my quotient. And now I'm going to subtract. And I get a 9, but uh-oh, I have nothing to bring down. I can't just write remainder 9 because I have to write my answer as a decimal. So here's what's new when we do these problems that you've never had to do before as a mathematician. So I'm so excited that I get to show it to you. You actually can put a 0 here and it doesn't change the number. I can add 1,000 zeros to the end and it would still be the same number, but I have to put a 0 here to make my remainder a 90. So now I want to look at, can 15 fit into 90? It absolutely can. It can fit in there 6 times. And it fits in there perfectly. So my answer would actually be 9,600. So this is why when you have been solving long division problems with the calculator, why it doesn't say remainder 9. It actually calculates that remainder as part of a decimal. So what we're doing here is we are still getting the same answer you did previously when you were doing long division. The only difference is we're writing our answer as a decimal instead of as a whole number with a remainder. So our answer should be 96 hundredths for this problem. Let's do one more because this topic is super tricky and I want to make sure we understand it. So we've got 97 5/10 divided by 6. So I'm going to put my decimal up in my answer and I can go ahead and start my problem. So 6 can fit into 9 one time. Bring down my 7. 6 can fit into 37 6 times. Bring down my 5. Oh, and this one, it looks like I get to put that 0 there too. So 6 can fit into 15. I know 6 times 3 is 18. That's too big, so it's got to be 2, which is 12. And I get a 3. and I have to write my answer as a decimal, so I gotta add my 0 and bring it down to make it a 30, and 6 can fit into 30 5 times, so my answer should be 16 and 25 hundredths. So today, you'll notice these problems do take you a little bit longer. It's okay if we don't finish an entire practice page worth of these problems. Do your very best and check your answers as you go, and I will see you in the meeting.